young triplets in 1975 was vanished. 20 years later their dad remembered. Part 1. The summer of 1975 came early in Corbridge, a quiet New England town wrapped in layers of misty pine and old secrets. The days were long, sticky with the scent of wet grass and sap, and the nights hummed with crickets and frogs like lullabies of the forest. That year, the Harris family, who lived on the edge of Deer Hollow Road, had just celebrated the 6th birthday of their triplets, Evan, Elsie, and Eli. The Harris house wasn't much, a faded green clapboard farmhouse with a wide porch that creaked underfoot, and a barn out back filled with tools no one had used in years. Their father, Thomas Harris, was a mill worker, and their mother, June, worked part-time at the library in town. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and the kids, always together, always laughing, made the old place seem full of life. Then came July 16th. No one remembered seeing them leave. No one remembered hearing a car. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or disturbed furniture. One moment the triplets were playing in the front yard under the oak tree, Evan dragging a red wagon filled with pine cones, Elsie humming a tune she'd made up about frogs and dresses, and Eli sitting cross-legged in the grass, watching ants. The next, they were gone. The town reacted with horror, of course. For weeks, search parties combed the nearby woods, volunteers trudging through thick underbrush and swamps with flashlights and hound dogs. Helicopters circled overhead. Reporters came from as far as Boston. Thomas and June gave interviews on the porch, their faces pale and drawn, voices trembling with disbelief. But no trace of the children was ever found. No footprints beyond the yard. No fibers. No blood. No ransom note. Nothing. And just like that, the triplets became a ghost story, a whisper among the townsfolk, a warning told to children, don't wander too far into the woods, or the Harris triplets will pull you in with them. Thomas changed after that. He stopped going to work. Stopped speaking to most people. By 1977, June had left. Said she couldn't breathe in that house anymore, couldn't sleep in the silence that screamed their names at night. No one blamed her. The farmhouse decayed. Weeds overtook the porch. The barn roof collapsed in a storm. Thomas stayed. Every year on July 16th, he put out 3 slices of chocolate cake on the porch, candles lit. No one ever touched them. Until 1995. That year, Thomas turned 63. He was thinner than people remembered, gray-haired and walking with a limp after a bad fall in the woods the year before. He rarely spoke to anyone, save for the clerk at Wilson's Market and Father Callahan at the chapel on Elm Street. He was, to most, a relic of grief. But that spring, something changed. It started with a photograph. Thomas had been clearing out the attic, trying to find an old fishing rod his brother had left him, when he came across a dusty shoebox wrapped in a child's quilt, the kind Elsie used to drag behind her like a cape. Inside the box were drawings, old birthday cards, a music box shaped like a carousel, and a Polaroid picture Thomas swore he'd never seen before. It was dated July 15, 1975, the day before they vanished. It showed the triplets standing in front of the barn, arms around each other, smiling. But it wasn't the photo that made Thomas's hands start to tremble. It was what stood behind them in the shadows of the barn doorway. At first, he thought it was a smudge, or maybe the shadow of the old weather vane. But the more he stared, the more the shape took form. A tall figure. Too thin. No features. Just wrong. He dropped the photo and didn't sleep for 3 nights. On the 4th, he returned to the attic. This time, he looked through every box. Found nothing more unusual. But the seed had been planted. Something in his mind began to stir, like a reel of film starting to turn after decades of silence. Something he had forgotten, or maybe was made to forget. He began writing again. Notes, memories, dreams. Pages and pages. Father Callahan later said he'd seen Thomas at the church library for hours, poring through old yearbooks, town records, even weather reports. He told the librarian he was looking for a crack in time. Something he'd missed. And then came July. One morning, just before sunrise, Thomas walked to the barn, what was left of it. He hadn't stepped foot in there in nearly 2 decades. He stood before the doorless frame, breathing the air like it was something sacred. Then he stepped inside. 3 hours later, he walked out carrying something wrapped in burlap and twine. He never told anyone what it was. But the next day, he made a call. To 911. Part 2. The 911 dispatcher who took the call said Thomas Harris's voice was calm. Too calm. "This is Thomas Harris," he'd said. "I need someone to come out to Deer Hollow Road. I believe I've found something related to the disappearance of my children." He gave no further explanation. Deputy Carla Mendez was the one dispatched. She was 29, relatively new to the Corbridge County Sheriff's Department, and had grown up hearing the story of the Harris triplets as if it were folklore. Her mother used to say that the town had lost its innocence the day those children vanished. Carla pulled up the gravel drive around 8:15 a.m. The sun had already burned away the mist, leaving the house bathed in golden light. It looked abandoned, the paint peeling off in long curls, windows clouded with dirt and time. But Thomas was sitting on the porch, his eyes fixed on the empty yard where the oak tree once stood before lightning split it in two. He greeted her with a nod, but no smile. "Mr. Harris," she said, climbing the steps. "You called about a development regarding your children?" Thomas gestured to the old workbench near the front door. On it lay the burlap-wrapped object, tied with brittle twine. Carla felt something shift in her chest, not quite fear, but a sense that the air around them had thickened. "I found it yesterday," Thomas said. "In the barn. Behind the false wall." "There was a false wall in your barn?" He didn't answer. Instead, he untied the twine. Inside was a rusted metal lunchbox. The kind kids carried to school in the 70s, brightly painted with cartoon characters. This one featured the Fantastic Four, though most of the paint had chipped away. Carla carefully opened it with gloved hands. Inside were 3 items. A lock of blonde hair tied with blue yarn. A small red toy soldier, its left arm melted. And a piece of paper, yellowed and water-stained, with words scrawled in childlike handwriting. "He watches us from the trees. Don't tell Daddy." Carla froze. "Where exactly did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas pointed. "Behind the far wall of the barn. There's a hollow space. I didn't build it." An hour later, Sheriff Nolan himself arrived. Within the next 6, the property was crawling with crime scene techs and forensic analysts. The barn was cordoned off. The area beneath the false wall was excavated. Nothing else was found. No remains. No more notes. Just the dust of decades. That night, Carla couldn't sleep. She found herself staring at a copy of the note. The words haunted her. Not because of what they said, but because of how they were written. The D in Daddy was backward. Just like in the note she'd found, years ago, tucked inside a copy of Charlotte's Web at the old Corbridge Elementary School. A note she thought had been left by a bored kid. That note had read, "He comes at night. I can hear him breathe." She'd dismissed it. She was in 6th grade at the time. Now, she wasn't so sure. She pulled out her old school diary from a box in the attic and flipped through the pages. It took her an hour to find it, the entry dated March 3, 1992. "Found a creepy note in the library book today." It was written in pencil and said something about breathing in night. Thought it was a joke, but Ms. Emery took it seriously and called the janitor. He said the crawl space had dead squirrels. EW. What if it hadn't been squirrels? What if someone had been living under the school? The next morning, Carla visited Corbridge Elementary, now closed and scheduled for demolition next year. The building was empty, save for a lone custodian, Marvin Doyle, who remembered her from years back. She asked him about the crawl space. "It's sealed up now," Marvin said. "Wasn't always. Back in the day, kids dare each other to crawl in there. That stopped after the triplets disappeared." "Why?" she asked. Marvin hesitated. Then leaned closer. "Because the boy, Eli, I think, used to say he heard voices from the vents. Kept telling the librarian someone was singing under the floor. Everyone thought he had an imagination. But when they vanished, some of us wondered." He paused. "And I'll tell you one thing I never told anyone, the day after they disappeared, I found that red toy soldier under the vent by the janitor's closet. But I was afraid to say anything. I didn't want to be blamed." Carla's blood ran cold. The toy in the lunchbox. The one with the melted arm. She asked Marvin if he remembered anyone unusual around the school in those years. Substitute teachers. Volunteers. Janitors. "There was one," he said slowly. "Tall fellow. Didn't talk much. Came on to fix the boiler sometime in '75. Real strange type. Always humming. He was missing 3 fingers on his left hand. Said they were lost in a fire." "Do you remember his name?" Marvin looked unsure. "Hollis. Maybe Horace. Something with an H." That night, Carla ran the name through every local and state database she had access to. Nothing came up. But she did find something else, an article from 1974, out of Barrows Hollow, a town 90 miles away. 3 children had gone missing in the woods behind a church retreat. Triplets. All 3 presumed dead. No arrests. No suspects. The parents moved away the following year. Their last name? Hollis. By the following week, Carla Mendez had become obsessed. She took vacation days from the department. Officially, she was assisting with an old missing persons case. Unofficially, she was sinking into something deeper, a rabbit hole layered with rotting paper, dust-thick silence, and secrets no one wanted unearthed. She drove to Barrows Hollow on a gray Thursday morning. The town was even smaller than Corbridge, with a single gas station, a boarded-up feed store, and a church that looked like it hadn't heard a sermon in a decade. Most of the residents were elderly. Most didn't want to talk. But Carla eventually found someone, an old woman named Rita who ran a second-hand bookshop out of what used to be the town post office. She remembered the Hollis family. They were strange, Rita said, shuffling around the shelves. Came here from somewhere in the South. Georgia or Alabama. The father was a preacher of sorts. Fire and brimstone type. Real theatrical. Wore gloves all the time. Even in summer. What about the kids? Carla asked. Rita gave a slow nod. Triplets. 1 boy, 2 girls. Pale as paper. Never smiled. Always dressed the same. Folks said they didn't go to school, but the church taught them at home. They vanished during a storm. March of '74, I believe. Sheriff said they'd wandered into the river. Were they ever found? No, Rita's voice dropped. But the night after, there was a fire at the church. Small one. The preacher was seen running from it. Never came back. Carla asked to see any local newspaper archives. Rita hesitated, then led her to a back room. Dusty stacks of microfilm reels sat forgotten in a cabinet. Hours passed as Carla read through old clippings. March 4, 1974, triplets missing after storm. March 5, 1974, community search called off, children presumed drowned. March 6, 1974, small fire damages church, no injuries reported. March 10, 1974, Hollis family vacates property, whereabouts unknown. One clipping stood out. Dated 3 days before the children vanished. Parishioners at Mount Hollow Church expressed concern over Pastor Hollis's recent sermons, which reportedly included references to purifying sacrifices and the voice beneath the floorboards. Carla's skin prickled. She took a photo of the article and drove back to Corbridge. That night, unable to sleep, she called Thomas Harris. It was past 11 p.m., but he answered on the first ring. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Do you remember anyone named Hollis? Maybe someone who came to town in the early 70s? Silence. Then Thomas said, "There was a man. Tall. Lanky. Wore gloves. I think he was a plumber, or at least said he was. Came around the time we renovated the house for the twins' 4th birthday." Triplets, Carla corrected. But Thomas didn't respond to that. He sounded unsure. "I remember him watching them," Thomas said. "Out the kitchen window. My wife, Mary, told me not to invite him back." "What happened to her?" "She passed in '88. Cancer. But before that, she changed. After the children disappeared, she kept saying strange things. That she could hear them. That they were still in the house." Carla paused. "Still in the house?" "Whispers in the walls. Footsteps in the attic. She used to put out bowls of cereal at night, as if they might come to the table in the morning." The phone line went quiet for a moment, then Thomas added. "I thought she was losing her mind. Now I'm not so sure." The next morning, Carla returned to the Harris property with a forensic sound engineer, a colleague from her academy days named Joel Kirkland. He specialized in microacoustic recordings. Together, they brought high-sensitivity microphones and recording gear. They set the equipment in the barn overnight. By sunrise, they had over 12 hours of audio. They filtered out insects, wind, and structural creaks. What remained was mostly silence. Except for a single moment, 3:17 a.m. A sound. Faint. Almost drowned by static. A child's voice. Just 3 words, whispered, barely audible. "Tell him now." Carla played it 5 times in a row. She didn't sleep that night either. A week later, a retired psychiatric nurse named Deborah Lang reached out. She had seen Carla's name in the Barrows Hollow paper, asking about the Hollis family. Deborah had worked in a sanitarium in South Carolina in the late 70s. And she'd had a patient named Hollis. His file was sealed, she told Carla over the phone. But he spoke often. In whispers. About the wrong triplets and the ones that weren't chosen. Chosen for what? Carla asked. That, Deborah said, was never clear. He called them mirrors of mirrors. Said they didn't belong here. Said the forest had lied. Sometimes he screamed about the cellar. Said the door in the cellar had teeth. She paused. And here's the strangest part, he insisted he was not the father of the triplets. He said he'd inherited them. The deeper Carla dug, the more fragmented the story became. Different towns. Different triplets. The same descriptions. The same age. The same pale skin. The same disappearances. What if these weren't isolated cases? What if someone, or something, was collecting them? She returned to the Harris house one final time that month. Not to investigate. Just to stand where it had begun. The front yard was overgrown. The barn remained sealed. But something drew her to the cellar. It had been locked for decades. Thomas handed her the key. the door groaned open. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so. She turned on her flashlight. The cellar was mostly empty. A few old cans. Dusty tools. Cobwebs. But in the far corner, where the foundation met dirt, there was something embedded in the wall. A mirror. Small. Circular. Cracked. She stepped closer. As she shone her light on it, the beam dimmed. Like the darkness around it absorbed the light. She leaned in. And in the reflection, for the briefest second, she saw not herself, but 3 children. Standing still. Staring at her. Then they were gone. Carla didn't tell anyone about the mirror. Not Joel, not Thomas, not even her therapist. What could she say? That she'd seen children who weren't there, triplets whose case file had been closed for 20 years, deemed unsolved and unremarkable? Instead, she took the cracked mirror from the cellar wall. She wrapped it in cloth and placed it inside a sealed evidence box. Back at her apartment, she locked it in a cabinet and pushed it to the back of her mind. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Again. At 3:17 a.m., she woke with a start, not from a nightmare, but from a noise. A soft tapping. From inside the cabinet. The next day, she interviewed a woman named Valerie Owens. Valerie had once lived across the road from the Harris family in 1975, though she'd moved out shortly after the children vanished. She now lived in assisted care, her memory scattered like torn pages, but when Carla showed her an old photo of the triplets, all dressed in white for their 4th birthday, Valerie recoiled. "No," she whispered, her eyes wide. "No, that's not right. That's not what they looked like." Carla frowned. "What do you mean?" "They were smaller. Not babies. Just less. Like someone had started to make children and then stopped halfway. You know what I mean?" Carla didn't. Valerie's hands trembled. "They weren't real. They didn't move right. They didn't look at you, they looked through you." She suddenly grabbed Carla's wrist. "Do not go back to that house," she hissed. "The voices want you to. They wait for visitors." Despite the warning, Carla did return. She had to. This time she brought ground-penetrating radar. A team of 2 forensic specialists helped her scan the cellar floor, the backyard, the barn foundation. Results came back inconclusive, until they reached a patch of ground under the old swing set. Roughly 6 feet down, something disrupted the soil. A hollow cavity. When they excavated the area, they didn't find bones. They found a wooden box. Sealed tight. Old, but intact. No markings. No hinges. It looked handmade, maybe by someone without tools. The box was delivered to the lab. Carla opened it alone. Inside were 3 white paper dolls, each with a string around its neck. Their eyes had been burned out. On the bottom of the box, written in faded ink. "Return them." That night, Carla received a call from a blocked number. When she answered, no one spoke. But in the silence, she heard breathing. And then, a whisper. "The ones you found are not the first." Click. Desperate for clarity, Carla dug through older records, deeper than the Harris file, deeper than Barrows Hollow. She found a case in Maine, 1949, 3 children vanished on the same day. A second case in Utah, 1956. A third in Indiana, 1962. All involving triplets. All unsolved. And each file contained a curious note written by a different investigator. The father began to remember things he shouldn't. It was as if remembering triggered something. As if the children weren't missing, but hidden behind a veil, and only memory could lift it. That night, Carla visited Thomas again. She asked him to describe what he remembered in the days before the children vanished. He hesitated. Then slowly, something came to him. There was a moment, he said, one afternoon. I came home from work. The house was too quiet. Mary was sitting in the kitchen. She looked wrong. I said hello. She didn't answer. Just stared at me. Carla leaned in. And the children? He shook his head. I found them in the barn. Sitting in the hay. All three of them. They didn't blink. Didn't speak. When I asked what they were doing, they said something strange. What did they say? He swallowed. They said, "We are not done yet." Later that night, Carla listened again to the barn recording from weeks before, the faint whisper at 3:17 a.m. She played it through a spectrogram analyzer, hoping to isolate frequencies. That's when she noticed something new. A secondary voice. Underneath the child's whisper, "Tell him now," there was another voice, deeper, almost growling, speaking in reverse. Carla reversed the track. The voice said, "Open the mirror." Her hand shook as she unlocked the cabinet. She unwrapped the cloth. The mirror was intact. Still cracked, but cold, too cold, as if it had been stored in ice. Carla turned it over. On the back, barely visible under dust and corrosion, was an engraving. "Them is not US." She stared into the reflection. Again, she saw three children. They did not move. But this time, one of them smiled. Carla spent the next few days researching the phrase engraved on the mirror's back, "Them is not US." It felt like a cryptic message, a warning or a clue deliberately left behind. She consulted linguists, occult experts, even cryptographers. The phrase wasn't a known proverb or code, but its grammar, odd and fragmented, suggested a voice not fully fluent in English, or perhaps deliberately broken to conceal meaning. The more she dug, the more the pieces of the puzzle tangled. She learned about a sect that had operated quietly in the southeastern U.S. during the mid-20th century, known only as the Children of the Hollow. Their beliefs revolved around the fractured self, and the idea that some children were not born but created vessels for something else. Curiously, the sect's symbols matched the etching on the mirror. Carla reached out to an expert in cult history, Professor Malcolm Reyes, who warned her over a shaky phone call. "Be very careful, Carla. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried. These children, if they were involved, then your investigation isn't just about a missing persons case anymore. It's about something far older and darker. And sometimes, the past fights back." Meanwhile, Thomas's health was declining. After years of silence and grief, memories were surfacing that tormented him. One evening, he called Carla in a trembling voice. "I dreamt of Mary again," he whispered. She was standing at the edge of the forest behind the house, holding the triplets. But they weren't children, their faces were blank, like mirrors. "And she told me, you can't save what isn't yours." Carla realized that the story wasn't just about lost children. It was about fractured memories, a family torn between what was real and what had been hidden, possibly altered. She asked Thomas if there was any way back into the house, to find something they might have missed. He hesitated, then said, "There's the attic. Locked since '74. Mary said it was worth the truth whispered beneath the floorboards." At the house, Carla and Joel forced the attic door open. Inside, dust motes floated in shafts of light. Old toys, faded drawings, and newspaper clippings littered the floor. But in the far corner, covered by a moth-eaten quilt, was an old phonograph. Carla wound the crank. A crackle, then a voice, Mary's. "My beloved children, I tried to keep you safe. But the mirror holds secrets it was not meant to keep. If you hear this, know that love was my prison, and memory my cage." The recording ended abruptly. Joel scanned the phonograph and discovered another tape hidden inside its base, unlabeled. When played, the tape revealed chilling chanting, a rhythmic, repetitive incantation in a language Carla couldn't identify. Underneath, the faintest cries, children's voices, overlapping, distorted. That night, Carla dreamt of the triplets again. They stood on the edge of a dark forest, faces still and unreadable. One reached out a hand. A voice whispered, "Find us." She woke up drenched in sweat. The chanting tape had disturbed Carla deeply. She took it to a sound engineer, who specialized in old recordings. He cleaned up the audio and isolated the voices. "There's definitely more than one voice here," he said. "Some are children's, but some sound almost inhuman. And there's a rhythmic pattern, like a code or language." Carla thought back to the phrase on the mirror, "Them is not us." Could the chant be related? Meanwhile, Thomas had a sudden relapse. At the hospital, he muttered in a near-delirious state. "They come in mirrors. They wait for the door to open." Carla held his hand tightly. The man who had once been so stoic now seemed haunted by ghosts. Determined to find answers, Carla and Joel returned to the house for a second search, focusing on the attic. This time, they noticed a faint draft near the wall behind the phonograph. Joel pressed against a loose panel, it creaked open. Behind it, a narrow crawl space filled with old documents and photographs. One photo caught Carla's eye, Mary Harris standing next to a strange figure, tall, shadowed, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the faded image. Beneath the photo was a handwritten note. "They are echoes. The triplets were never truly here. Only shadows of what should have been." Carla's heart pounded. What did that mean? Carla dug deeper into local archives and found a diary belonging to a woman named Helen Barrows, Mary's childhood friend. In it, Helen described a terrifying event. A ritual at the edge of the woods. The elders spoke of the birth of fragments. Mary cried but said it was necessary. She swore to protect the children, but from what, she did not say. The diary ended abruptly. Carla wondered, what if the triplets were part of a ritual? Something meant to create, or perhaps contain, something else? That night, Carla dreamt again. This time, the triplets beckoned her toward the mirror. They whispered, barely audible, but urgent, "Remember, remember, remember." She woke to find the mirror cracked wider than before. And the cabinet door ajar. The line between memory and reality blurred. Carla knew the answers were close, but so was danger. Because some secrets don't just wait quietly. They watch. Carla was becoming consumed by the case. Every waking hour was spent poring over old documents, photographs, interviews, and obscure references. One morning, she received an unexpected visitor. A man in his late 50s, wearing a worn leather jacket and carrying an old briefcase. He introduced himself simply as Elliot Crane. "I knew the Harris family," he said quietly. "Back in the day. More than you realize." Carla felt a chill. "How? You never mentioned before." Elliot hesitated, then pulled out a faded photo from his briefcase, the triplets playing in a field, but with shadows lurking just beyond the frame. "I was part of something," he said. "Something dark. We tried to protect the children, but in the end, we failed." Elliot revealed that he was once a member of a secretive group, tasked with monitoring unexplained phenomena around Barrows Hollow. The triplets weren't just children. They were vessels. The result of a ritual that twisted reality. He described strange disappearances over decades, all linked by subtle signs, cracked mirrors, whispered chants, and the phrase Carla had found. They tried to trap whatever was coming. But those rituals fractured the children's souls. Not lost, but scattered between worlds. Carla pressed Elliot about the mirror. "It's a gateway," he said. "But it's unstable. The cracks grow because the barrier weakens." He warned Carla to be careful. You're not just chasing memories. You're chasing something that wants out. That night, Carla dreamt of the triplets again. This time, they were trapped inside the mirror, their faces pressed against the glass, mouths moving silently. One child's voice echoed in her mind, "Help us." Carla's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or lose yourself." The warning was clear. But Carla knew she couldn't stop. Because some truths are worth the cost. Days turned into restless nights. Carla's apartment filled with scattered notes, old photos, and tape recordings. Her mind was a labyrinth of half-remembered facts and emerging nightmares. She knew she was close, dangerously close. Elliot Crane agreed to take Carla to a forgotten part of Barrows Hollow, where the secret group had held its last meeting. They drove deep into the forest, past overgrown trails and crumbling stone markers. At last, they reached an ancient stone altar, carved with strange symbols matching those on the mirror's etching. "This is where the ritual took place," Elliot said gravely. Carla scanned the clearing. There was a faint shimmer in the air, a distortion, like heat waves on a summer road. Elliot whispered, "This place exists between moments. It's why time feels off here." Suddenly, the ground trembled. A low hum filled the air. Carla's heart pounded as shadows seemed to stretch from the trees, twisting into forms that resembled children. "Them is not us," the chant echoed softly. Carla felt a pull, as if the forest itself was trying to reach inside her mind. Elliot grabbed her arm. "We don't have much time." Back at her apartment, Carla listened to the chanting tape again. This time, she noticed a pattern, a code embedded in the rhythm. She decoded a phrase hidden within. "To remember is to return." Carla's thoughts raced. What if the triplets' disappearance was not a simple vanishing, but a crossing? A slipping between worlds? And what if the fractured memories of their father, Thomas, were the key to bringing them back? But if to remember is to return, then what awaited them on the other side? Carla knew she was about to step into the unknown. And there was no turning back. Carla sat by the window in her dimly lit apartment, the rain tapping softly against the glass. The rhythmic sound matched the chant that echoed endlessly in her mind from the tape, "Them is not us." The words seemed to pulse, alive, as if they carried a secret breath, a warning, or perhaps a curse. She flipped through the faded diary of Helen Barrows again, tracing her finger over the cracked, yellowed pages. The final entry gnawed at her thoughts. "The ritual has shattered the boundary. The children are both here and not here. A veil lifted too soon. Mary's eyes hold the sorrow of worlds unseen." Carla ran her hand through her hair. Mary Harris, the mother of the triplets, had vanished from the records almost immediately after the disappearance, as if erased. Her husband Thomas had sunk into silence and sorrow, holding on to fading fragments of memories that seemed more like dreams. 2 days earlier, Carla had returned to Barrows Hollow with Elliot. The forest loomed dark and oppressive, thick with moss and ancient secrets. "We're not just revisiting history," Elliot warned as they stepped through twisted roots and fallen leaves. "We're stepping into a fracture in reality." They reached the clearing with the stone altar. The carvings were more vivid than before, illuminated faintly by the mist curling through the trees. Elliot knelt, tracing the symbols. "These aren't just marks. They're seals, meant to contain something," he whispered. Suddenly, the ground trembled faintly beneath their feet. Carla's breath caught. From the shadows emerged vague forms, ephemeral silhouettes of children, flickering at the edge of vision. Their faces were blurred, features shifting like smoke in the wind. Carla's heart pounded. "Are those the triplets?" Elliot nodded slowly. "Echoes. Fractures of their souls caught between this world and the next." That night, Carla called Thomas. His voice was thin, fragile. "I had another dream," he said. "The triplets, they reached out from the mirror. They want to come home." Carla hesitated. Thomas, do you remember anything more? Anything about that night in 1975? He was silent for a long moment. Only flashes. Mary crying in the attic, the chanting, the mirror cracking. Then, a light. Blinding. She urged him gently, what about the mirror? What did you see? I saw, myself. But not me. Someone else. Whispering, they are not yours to keep. Carla's mind reeled. If the triplets were trapped between worlds, was the mirror their prison? Or a gateway? Was Thomas's fading memory a barrier, or a key? Days turned into restless nights. Carla obsessed over the phrase on the mirror's back, them is not us. Could it mean the triplets were not truly human? Or that they had been replaced? She dove into folklore and occult studies, piecing together tales of doppelgangers, shadow children, and parallel worlds. One name surfaced repeatedly, the Hollow Children, a cult rumored to meddle with forces beyond comprehension. Carla found an old newspaper clipping from 1974. Mysterious rituals disrupt local community, police investigate secret group. The article mentioned disappearances, strange symbols, and a mother who had fought fiercely to protect her children from an unseen menace. Mary Harris's name was never in the public record, but her presence was felt in whispers. Carla's phone buzzed. A new message from the unknown number. They watch. You watch. The mirror waits. Carla looked up at the mirror in her apartment. Its cracks spiderwebbed across the glass like frozen lightning. Her reflection shimmered, then blurred. For a fleeting moment, she saw not her own face, but three children's, their eyes wide, their mouths mouthing silent pleas. She was no longer chasing a missing persons case. She was chasing a fractured truth that could unravel her own reality. The rain had not stopped for hours. Carla sat at her cluttered desk, a single lamp casting a pool of warm light on the scattered papers before her. The old tape recorder lay silent, its play button long since pressed and paused. Her mind drifted back to the phone call with Thomas earlier that day. She could still hear his trembling voice. Carla, I need to tell you something, Thomas had said hesitantly. Before I forget it again. Anything, Thomas. I'm listening. He cleared his throat. That night, the night the triplets vanished, I was upstairs. I heard Mary chanting. It wasn't a prayer. It was something else. Something dark. Carla leaned forward, her pen poised above her notebook. What was she chanting? I can't remember the words exactly. But it was about guarding the threshold, about keeping them out. Or maybe in. I don't know. He paused, voice faltering. Then I saw her go to the mirror in the attic. It was cracked then, but glowing. She touched it, and the light, it swallowed her. The children weren't with her. I ran downstairs and found the house empty. Carla rubbed her temples. So much depended on fragmented memories, whispers of things long buried. She glanced at the cracked mirror leaning against the wall, the same mirror Thomas had described. Suddenly, a soft tapping drew her gaze. A shadow flickered behind the glass. Her phone buzzed again. A message from the unknown number. Look deeper. The threshold is broken. Determined, Carla contacted Joel and Elliot to meet at the old Harris house. Together, they explored the attic under the flickering light of their flashlights. Dust danced in the beams as they approached the mirror. Joel placed a gloved hand on its surface. Feels cold, he murmured. Carla studied the cracks, noticing now that they formed shapes, almost like letters or symbols. Elliot pulled out a notebook filled with sketches of similar symbols from their earlier investigations. These match the seals from the altar, he whispered. They're breaking. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room. The air grew heavy, oppressive. Carla's breath caught as the mirror began to ripple like water. A faint voice echoed, distant but unmistakable. "Remember us?" Carla's heart pounded. She felt a presence, watching, waiting. Joel gripped her arm. "We shouldn't stay," he warned. But Carla was frozen, eyes locked on the mirror. In its depths, she glimpsed three faces, the triplets. Their eyes pleading, their mouths moving silently. "Help us," the voice whispered again. Carla swallowed hard. "This is it," she said softly. "The threshold is open." The house groaned, dust falling from the ceiling. Elliot checked his watch nervously. "We need to act fast before it collapses." Carla took a deep breath. "We have to remember." Carla sat on the creaky wooden floor of the Harris attic, her back resting against a dusty beam. The cracked mirror before her seemed alive, its surface undulated softly, as if breathing. The voices whispered, barely audible, yet impossible to ignore. Joel paced nervously, glancing at the ancient clock on the wall. Elliot crouched beside Carla, eyes fixed on the mirror, fingers tracing the fading runes etched into its frame. "Carla," Elliot said quietly, "the seals are breaking faster than I expected. Whatever force held the triplets trapped is weakening." She swallowed hard. "What happens if they fully break?" Elliot's gaze darkened. "The barrier between worlds collapses. We might lose them, or worse, let in something we can't control." Joel stopped pacing. "So what's the plan?" "We can't just sit here waiting." Carla nodded slowly, determination sharpening her features. "We remember. We tell their story, every detail Thomas recalls. Memory is the key, to unlock the mirror or to seal it forever." She pulled out Thomas's diary, flipping to the page with his fragmented sketch of the attic. "Look here, this drawing. The mirror, the altar, the ritual markings, they connect. If we can recreate the ritual properly, we might guide the triplets back." Elliot looked doubtful. "Recreating a ritual with incomplete knowledge? It's dangerous." "But it's the only chance we have," Carla insisted. The group worked quickly, gathering candles, salt, and symbols from Elliot's notes. Outside, the storm raged, wind howling through cracked windows. As Carla began chanting the phrases Thomas had whispered, the attic grew colder. Shadows lengthened and twisted. The mirror's surface shimmered, revealing clearer images of the triplets, their small faces anxious, trapped between light and darkness. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed. One section of the mirror splintered further. Joel shouted, "It's collapsing!" Carla kept chanting, voice steady but urgent. "Come back to us. Remember who you are." A brilliant light burst from the mirror, filling the attic. When the glow faded, the mirror was whole again, smooth, calm. And there, standing faintly, were three small figures. The triplets. Carla's breath caught. Their eyes met hers, full of fear and hope. Thomas's voice echoed in her memory, whispering, they remembered. The faint figures of the triplets flickered like ghosts in the soft glow of the attic. Their small hands reached out hesitantly toward Carla, their eyes wide but distant, as if struggling to cross an invisible boundary. Carla's heart pounded. "Can you hear me? It's me, Carla. We're here to bring you home." One of the children, the boy, blinked slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. "We don't know where home is." Elliot stepped forward cautiously. "You've been trapped, between worlds. 20 years lost in the space between. But now you can choose." The girl on the left shivered, looking toward the mirror. "It's not safe. Something's waiting." Joel tightened his grip on a candle. "What's waiting?" The children exchanged a glance. The boy spoke again, "The others. They don't want us to leave." Carla swallowed hard, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing in. Who are the others? The girl's voice dropped to a fearful whisper. Lost souls. Shadows that hunger for the living. The attic seemed to darken, the air growing colder still. The group huddled together, feeling the oppressive presence that lingered like a heavy fog. We need to protect them, Carla said. And ourselves. Elliot nodded. We must complete the ritual, but this time with strength, with memory and intention. Carla closed her eyes, drawing on every memory Thomas had shared, every detail, every whispered word. She began the incantation anew, this time louder, steadier. By the light of the dawn, by the bonds of blood, by the will to remember, we break the chains, we open the path. The triplets' figures grew clearer, their forms more solid. The boy reached out his hand, trembling. Will we remember? You will, Carla promised. Every moment, every laugh, every tear. Suddenly, a violent gust slammed the attic door shut. Joel rushed to open it, but it held firm. From the mirror came a low, rumbling growl, the presence of the other stirring, resisting. Carla's voice wavered but did not stop. We will not let you keep them. The candles flickered, shadows danced wildly on the walls. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. Lightning flashed, illuminating the desperate faces in the attic. Carla felt tears stream down her cheeks, tears of fear, hope, and something deeper, the raw pain of years lost and futures stolen. Remember, she whispered to the triplets, remember who you are. And as the light from the mirror enveloped them, the attic was filled with a brilliant, blinding glow. When the light dimmed, the triplets were gone. Only silence remained. Carla's voice broke the stillness. They're free, but where? Elliot shook his head. Between worlds, for now. But soon they will find their way. Joel looked out the window, the storm finally abating. We've opened a door. Now it's up to them to walk through it. Carla sat back, exhausted but resolute. The journey was far from over. But for the first time in 20 years, hope burned bright. The silence that followed the blinding glow was thick, almost suffocating. The attic seemed colder than before, as if the very air had been drained of warmth. Carla, Joel, and Elliot stood motionless, their eyes searching every shadowed corner. Where do you think they went? Joel finally broke the silence, voice barely above a whisper. Carla rubbed her tired eyes. Between worlds, like Elliot said. But this in-between isn't just empty space. It's something else, a place trapped between memories and reality, where lost souls can get stuck. Elliot nodded gravely. I've studied similar phenomena in old folklore and modern cases. It's like a liminal zone, a threshold where time and space fold strangely. If the triplets are there, they're caught in a loop, unable to move forward or back. Joel paced restlessly. Then our job's not over. We have to find a way to bring them fully back, body and soul. Carla's mind raced back to the years before the disappearance, the anxious faces of the neighbors, the frantic searches, the cold police reports. Something had been overlooked, some detail buried under decades of grief. She pulled out a worn notebook, her father's journal, a record of his memories, suspicions, and unspoken fears. Look at this, she said, flipping through pages filled with shaky handwriting. Here, Dad wrote about the night the triplets vanished. He mentioned strange lights in the forest behind the house. Lights no one could explain. Elliot leaned in. Forest lights. Could be connected to the portal. Maybe a nexus point where the barrier between worlds is weakest. Joel looked up, eyes sharp. If that's true, then going back to the forest might give us answers, or clues. The storm had passed, but the forest loomed like a silent sentinel just beyond the house. The three of them prepared, flashlights, cameras, and the ritual items they still carried. As they stepped into the forest's edge, the cool night air wrapped around them. Leaves rustled underfoot. The woods were unnervingly still, but the shadows seemed alive, moving just beyond sight. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared through the trees. Carla's breath hitched. That must be it. They followed the light deeper into the forest, heartbeats syncing with the crunch of twigs. The glow pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat itself. When they reached a small clearing, the source revealed itself, an ancient stone altar, half covered in moss, etched with the same symbols from the attic mirror. Joel stepped forward, brushing away vines. This is where it began. Elliot examined the altar closely. And maybe where it can be undone. Carla circled the altar, tracing the carvings with trembling fingers. A sudden whisper carried on the wind, indistinct words, but unmistakably a child's voice. Help us. Carla's eyes widened. The triplets. They're still here. Not just trapped between worlds, but tethered to this place. Joel looked uneasy. Then we have to finish what was started here. The ritual, the seals, the memories. Elliot nodded. But this time it has to be complete. No gaps, no hesitations. As they prepared the ritual items around the altar, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The glow intensified. Carla closed her eyes, drawing on every detail she could remember, every word from Thomas, every symbol, every emotion. She began the chant. The trees around them shimmered, as if reality itself was bending. From the shadows emerged fleeting shapes, fragments of the triplets' memories, laughter, tears, running through the house, hiding in closets, chasing butterflies. The forest echoed with the bittersweet symphony of lost childhood. Then, a chilling wind cut through the clearing. The others stirred. The clearing was alive with restless shadows, swirling in the cold night air. Carla's voice rang clear and steady as she completed the ritual chant, weaving together memory, love, and resolve. The altar pulsed with ancient power, and the glowing runes carved into the stones flared bright as day. Suddenly, the air snapped, like a veil tearing. The triplets appeared before them, not as ghosts, but as living, breathing children. Their eyes, however, told stories of years lost in darkness, fear, confusion, but also hope. Carla stepped forward slowly. You're safe now. We've brought you home. The boy's voice trembled. We remember, but everything is so blurry. Why were we taken? Joel's face hardened. Because someone wanted to keep you hidden, trapped between worlds, a secret no one dared speak aloud. Elliot's expression darkened. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was a ritual, one that went horribly wrong. Carla held out her father's worn journal. This is what your father uncovered. The truth about that night. With trembling hands, she opened to a hidden page, a confession scrawled in desperate handwriting. Thomas had discovered that a powerful local cult had tried to harness the triplets' unique bond, believing their connection could open gateways to other realms. When the ritual backfired, the children became trapped in the liminal space, caught between life and death, this world and the next. The triplets exchanged glances, the weight of the revelation sinking in. We were pawns, the girl whispered. Carla nodded. But now you're free. Suddenly, a faint glow surrounded the children, growing stronger. The others, Elliot warned. They're trying to pull them back. Joel took a stand, chanting a protective spell learned from old texts. The shadows recoiled, hissing, before dissolving into the night. With a final flash, the triplets' form solidified fully. They blinked, gasping for breath, as if waking from a long, terrible dream. Carla embraced them gently. Welcome home, she whispered. The dawn broke over the forest, golden light washing away decades of darkness. Thomas's diary closed with a soft thud. The truth was finally out. And though scars remained, the family could begin to heal. The end, or perhaps a new beginning.